This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for Heart Mojo. And Melinda, you are bringing back not only a guest that we've had on before, but he is also a friend of ours. So we sort of know his story, but I have a feeling as you start talking to him, we're going to learn some other things about your guest. So why don't you introduce him and we'll get started.
Welcome, Michael Gershe. How are you today?
I am great. And how are you two doing on this nice cold day?
Peachy, waiting for the snow. Yeah.
I closed my
Not
blinds,
really.
so I'm in denial about the weather right now. I don't want to see it out there. I'm not going to open them up until March.
Oh, so you're not going to work until March. Okay.
You can take your pictures from outside.
Right. You leave it at the doorstep.
Yeah.
Right.
But thank you for having me on. And it's always awesome to have a chat with you guys about some topics that no one really wants to talk about.
And we did have you on 4 years ago, maybe? We weren't doing videos at that time. We were still doing just audio.
Correct. It was correct. It was a little bit different than
and we focused a lot on your fundraising, which we will get to down the road. But first, tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I'm 53 years old, which is a blessing. I'm a survivor of a drunk driving crash that killed my mother and almost myself when I was 8 weeks old. All my bones were broken. My skull was completely fractured. So I grew up to be a competitive swimmer, comedian, author, photographer as well. So even on the cold days, any day I can wake up is still a good day, even on the dark days where it's a struggle.
Yeah.
And I dedicated my life to present my story about how to prevent impaired driving. I've been doing that, almost 30 years.
Wow.
So, and I've spoken at colleges, high schools, military bases. I just wrapped up my 10th year at the Stowe Court here in Northeast Ohio, talking to DUI offenders, which has been probably my most rewarding audience I've ever spoken in front of. And it's given me valuable lessons in life, but also to watch them change in that 90 minutes together. Not everyone, but a lot of them is, man, as a speaker, it's awesome to do. But I think as a person who has a story, and we all have stories, if we could share our story to impact someone else's life, then that's pretty remarkable and fantastic to do. And you could do it with humor, even better.
Absolutely.
Well, that's one of the things we try to do with this show. If it helps one person out there listening to your story, then it's been a successful series, right? So start out, and I hate to make you go through it, but start out talking about exactly what happened to you and your mom and your family.
Back on September 19th, 1970, my father was driving us home from Long Island. We lived like an hour and a half away, and it was around 11 o'clock at night. And we were at a red light less than a mile away from our house when my dad started to go through that intersection. When our light turned green, a drunk driver plowed through the intersection, T-boned the car. And the force of the impact was so great, it totaled the cars, but also pushed our car into a telephone pole and split it, halfway up to the dashboard.
Wow.
So we were taken to the same hospital. My brother didn't have a scratch on him. My brother was sleeping in the back seat, not wearing a seatbelt. So of course, no, he couldn't tense up. He didn't know,
Right.
My mom was taken into surgery for her injuries, and she passed away the next morning. My dad had to get stitches on his face from the windshield, and I was life flighted to another hospital in New York. I had to get so many blood transfusions that my aunt Sue lost count of how many I received, and somehow I survived. My dad was going through hell because the doctors were telling him, well, your infant son is touch and go. We don't know if he's going to survive. And my mom was fighting for her life.
It's gone.
And you take any one of those for any person, it's horrible. And my dad was going through too. And I had to be put on a special board because they couldn't put me in a cast because I was cartilage. I had to be taken to the hospital for months afterwards to make sure I didn't have any brain damage. And as you two know, I'm perfectly okay. No
we
problem
can debate
at
that
all.
a little bit.
Yeah, Yeah, no judgment here. But with all those injuries, I grew up to be a competitive swimmer. And even though I had to go to speech therapy as a kid, we had no idea it was due to the car crash, or just normal childhood pains.
Mhm.
And it was around high school when I found out it was drunk driving. My dad never really talked about it, not knowing that he couldn't. If you think about men from that era, 60s, 70s, who never talked about grief,
Right.
emotion, anything. All I knew was my mother was dead. It was a car crash. So back then it was an accident, but we don't consider drunk driving accidents. We call them crashes. And one day I was going in my dad's room to get his wallet with his permission, opened up his drawer and I opened up when I opened up the dresser drawer, next to his wallet was the press release. And that's how I found out I was drunk driving.
Mhm.
And I was in a group called SAD in high school shortly after that, Students Against Drunk Driving. And then when I got into college, I was a member of campus activities board, and I found out you could be a speaker and those type of things. So that got me on that track of being a speaker. And it's been when you have purpose, and that was my purpose. I even at that age of 15, I didn't want other families to go through the same pain my family went through. And you try to prevent that because it's all preventable.
Mhm.
And you go through a lifetime of grief and trauma and trying to overcome that. I've been through it as a kid, as a teenager, an adult, and it took until 2018 when my father passed away and then my aunt passed away 90 days after him, where I ended up in grief counseling. I really went for my dad and my aunt, but the first question or the first statement my counselor said to me was, "Hey, let's talk about your mom's death and how that impacted all your relationships." And it did have an impact. And I was like, "I'm not here to talk about my mom." And she's like, "Yeah, we are." And I was 47 years old, and the very first time processing my mom's death. I used swimming as an outlet. I used to swim angry and take it out on God, my father, Harvey Dennison would kill my mom. And then we talked about music for a little bit before this, and music was an outlet, Kiss, wearing that. Star Wars toys, and pretending I was elsewhere, and Spider-Man or whatever it was. Never self-medicated for grief and trauma, those type of things. I always found alternative ways to do that. Comedy, humor. Humor has been my defense mechanism my entire life. But I was 47, and for the very first time, I had to put the work into everything. I mean, my mom's death, my parents, my dad's death, my aunt, my friend John, who died, gosh, it'll be 20 years next year, and he died as a result of being a drunk driver. So there was a lot that I had to work
Right.
on, and it was hard work. I mean, I didn't want to go on to medication. Medication's okay, and that's one half the solution if you need it. But the problem was myself, and I had to fix me, and that was hard. But I had to ask for help because that week I was done. I was like, I don't want to be here, and I had a plan, and then I asked for help. And for all the men who are out there, asking for help is a sign of strength. There are people that care about you, that love you, that want to help you. There's no shame in asking for help. And it's probably one of the best things I ever did for myself.
Well, when you look at that and you look at your father, right? And how do you think your father dealt with it, or did he never deal with it?
I don't think he did in terms of the healing process. I remember when my grandfather died in April of 95. No, 94. I was still in grad school. I don't think I graduated then. It might have been 95. Now I can't remember those years.
Mm.
We went to the cemetery. That was the first time I went to the cemetery to visit my mom. And not too far was a bench. And I remember looking at my dad, and I'd never seen him cry like that. He was crying, and that grief and trauma was still there. And I think he just put his energy into me and my brother, and raising us. Even though we had help by a woman named Dolly that both of you guys know, but for your listeners or the viewers, I was raised by a Jamaican woman along with my dad. My grandmother put an ad in the newspaper for part-time help back in late October, November of 1970. And this woman, Dolly, answered the ad. She was visiting her sister for 3 months in New York and thought it was going to be a part-time job, which turned into a lifetime role. So And so we were blessed with that. So between my dad and Dolly raising us, my dad really focused, I think, me and my brother more than anything else, and put aside that grief and trauma. On one year, December 19th, 2012, he sent me and my brother an email, which would have been my parents' 48th wedding anniversary. And he said, even to that day, it was still too hard to talk about. Those are all things I never knew. As a kid, as a teenager, as an adult, I wanted him to talk about my mom, not realizing until that moment that he couldn't. He didn't know how. And different generations, right?
Right.
Well,
In terms of that.
And that's exactly what it was, because his generation was taught to be manly, and manly meant we
Tough it
don't.
out.
Yeah,
Tough it out.
suck it up, right? That was ours, and as well. And it's still prevalent in today's society. And some, I think we're doing better, but I don't think it's widely accepted, right? Especially from the male point of view. And then with counseling and writing my book and getting it all out there, and reading Brene Brown's books about shame
She's
and
great.
resilience and stuff. And it was like, and it was freeing, because now instead of my grief and trauma or depression controlling me, I sort of had the ability to kind of, I wouldn't say control it, but have the skills to navigate through it. Even on the dark days where you have those thoughts, they're just thoughts, and not thinking you could ever go through it.
It's not taking over you.
Yeah, I'll give you a good example. Getting a firearm. You think about those days of self-protection and being Jewish and anti-Semitism going up. Do I need one? Need versus want. And you think about on those dark days, do I want a firearm nearby?
Yeah.
That's been in my mindset since early October. And it hasn't been easy, but I have to be real with myself too, right? In terms of that. And then going back to counseling and people I can rely on in terms of help, going, okay, I'll be fine if I choose, to move forward with it. Then I'm fine without it too. But I think it took, not to pat myself on the back, but that type of self-awareness, and to go, maybe it's not a good idea, to have one. Will I be okay or not? And I think that's a good discussion that I've had with friends, and talk about it. Whereas I think before counseling, I never would have said anything about it.
Before I want to go back to your brother for a minute, but first, since you touched on what's happening with Israel and the anti-Semitic activities, do you feel, watching what was going on in that area of the world, that you felt some of your grief? Because I know, as a mother, watching these women being taken, or their children being taken, that brought up a whole different set of feelings for me that I didn't really ever have to deal with. Did it bring up feelings for you as well?
It did, because when I was in college, I had to deal with anti-Semitism and threats and those type of things. And it's like, oh, here we go again. And then you're out in public, and then you're like, you just don't know, right? And then it's, the increase of it happening. And as my dad would say, there's a lot of crazies out there. With social media, we didn't have social media back when I was in college in 88 through 92. So, a lot of it now is promoted through social media, and that's dangerous as well. So it did bring up, and I would say the kidnapping first of all, and then of course innocent lives on the other side. No one wants to see that.
Both
right?
sides, absolutely.
Both sides. And I think, God, if you have a soul, you see that, right? But yeah, it did bring back up a lot of stuff. And
I mean, it's a sudden loss. You
Right.
dealt with a sudden loss, right? Not knowing. These same families, they don't know what happened to their loved one or how it
Right.
happened. So for me, and looking at that, it was very hard. So, I wanted to know, because you want to know what's going on in the world. But then after a while, I had to shut it down, because
Correct.
the feelings were just too much.
Yep, it is. Yeah, exactly. And then I had to go out and go for a hike or do photography or escape ism for a little bit. And you're right. A little bit of news is okay, but yeah, I couldn't have, it on 24/7.
So what
Yeah,
you're telling
dealing
our
with that loss.
listeners is you have this toolbox. It's called hiking, riding your bike, photography, comedy,
Comedy.
different things that you go to sort of get you out of that dark place. Many of us, we get in that dark place and we keep going back into it because we think it's comforting. And the reality of it is we have to create that toolbox, whether it's friends or independent things that, bring us some happiness.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly right. And man, even working out, watching a movie, reading a book, whatever, cooking a meal, going to Dairy Queen and having a large blizzard, something that's going to be, not every day, but something like that. And I think we all have the ability for it. I think people have to be patient with themselves, but also realize that they have the power to ask for help. And there's no shame in that. And people care and love. After I wrote the book and people read about it, I had family members who said, we always thought you were okay. They had no idea. A friend of mine that I met up with yesterday who read the book, he goes, I've been a bad friend. I didn't know about these things. So I was like, Matt, they were all inside, man. I mean, of course you didn't know about these things. You didn't know. And we keep so much in here. It's tiring. It's exhausting when it's all in here.
Mhm.
And that's where the trouble and like you said, Karen, when it wraps you up like a warm blanket on a cold evening, that's when it gets kind of dangerous, right? Because then
Exactly.
you don't want to get out of it. It's like, oh, this is nice and comfy, but we also know that's so unhealthy to do.
Right. So I want to step back to your brother for a minute. I didn't want to lose track of that. So how did your relationship work with your brother with the loss of your mother? Because he was a little bit older, doesn't seem like much older.
He was
Did he
3.
have memories? Did you have discussions as children?
Well, he's not here. We're not going to talk about him. Whatever. He had a harder time. He had separation anxiety because one day mom didn't come home. So when my dad was going to work, he would freak out. And they had to do different things for him, wake him up before dad left, get him up, whatever. So there was a huge adjustment for my brother. He remembers bits and pieces of the crash, but we really don't talk about that. And the reason being, I got help. I don't, and then he watches this, he may watch it. I don't think he's ever really, gone through the process like I have through counseling. Right after our dad died, I was trying to get him, once I got through counseling and it helped, I was hoping that he would. And there's times where he goes, maybe I should. And it took him about 1.5 years to read the book because it would bring up all those things.
Right.
I just did the crazy time for my brother. Well, oh well. So he remembers bits and pieces of the crash, but we don't talk about that. Again, so what do we ask? But he remembers minor details of that moment. But and vague, he was 3, so vague memories of my mom. His adjustment to Dolly was tough. I was only an infant. She stayed in my room, so that's all I've known.
Right.
He would tell her, you're not the boss of me, for a 3-year-old. And then one time he finally got adjusted. It was his time to go to bed, and she was on the phone, and she told my brother, hey, your grandmother's going to put you to bed. And he was like, I'll wait for Dolly to get off the phone, and sat down by her feet. So that's when, that adjustment was there. But yeah, I mean, I would think little kids like that are resilient too. They're a sponge, now, there's a lot of counseling and so forth, but, it takes time, for that. And it has to be, I would say, in the right environment though, too. And I think that's key. I think we had the right environment for my brother, between my dad and Dolly and my grandparents to ease him along. Counseling would have been good for him back then? Maybe, for both of us. As I said earlier, the first statement my counselor says, let's talk about your relationships, right? At my mom's death. And she was right, because I saw what my father went through, and I went, I don't want to experience that, that loss, that trauma,
that loss.
Even though I've been in relationships and always did something to screw it up, because that's what I do, or have done in the past, until I read more about attachment styles and grief and trauma and those type of things and how to heal. But I think if we were processing getting help as kids, it would have been a little bit different. I think if my dad talked to us, it would have been a little bit different, but I always was like, I don't want to get married. I don't want to have kids because then that loss is so huge. I don't want to go through that. Sucks, but that's my reality. Plus,
So did you,
go ahead.
did you not have pets either? Because
I had pets.
that's,
I had a bird for 26 years.
Ah.
I had a pet bird named Mickey.
so you did have some sort of pet, because ultimately there's a loss with every pet, right?
Right. Yeah.
Unless you
Yeah.
get a turtle or a tortoise that lives 150 years.
Still a pet though, right?
Yeah.
Mm,
Still a pet.
it is, it is.
Interesting.
So you developed a toolbox that helps you deal with all of the things that you've been grieving over the years. What's your number one tool for yourself?
Oh God. It's gotta be my sense of humor is probably my number one right there. Photography would be probably two, nature, 2, 3, those type of, probably those two. There's nothing better than being behind the lens, out on the trail, hearing nothing or birds, whatever, and trying to capture what you see in the eye behind the lens, and then seeing that picture and kind of go, yeah, I got that.
And then sharing it.
Yeah, I mean, it's an artist thing, right? Whether it's a new comedy bit that you do and you want the audience reaction to laugh, whether I take a picture of a sunset and people get different feelings from it or emotions, I love that. And I think anyone artistic, likes that. It's just another way to connect with a different audience. Yeah, it's pretty neat when people appreciate, I would say, your art, whether it's jokes, whether it's a book, whether it's photography for myself.
Do you
And
think
one
you
of the
picked up
things that-
photography because of your dad?
Yeah, that's one thing, because he got us into it. My dad and my mom met. So my
That's
dad
how
was
they
a
met,
school-
right?
Yeah, my dad was a school photographer at NYU, and he was shooting a school dance, and the only person looking at him on the dance floor was my mom. And it's a really cool picture. I have it still printed out. And then he passed that down to us. And then my friend Ray, who was a counselor at Bluffton, I went to go speak at that university, and she's also a photographer too. And I remember taking pictures with my iPhone 4, and she goes, "You need to go get a real camera." So I got a refurbished Canon, and I was off and running. And that was, 2016. Never thinking this is where it would lead, where I've done exhibits at Western Reserve Hospital, other places, or selling a couple, photos here or there. Yeah, it's pretty awesome when people appreciate it. Go, you know what, I'd like to have a copy of that, and that's pretty cool. I think that's just an added bonus of doing photography. But yeah, I think you're right. It's mainly because of my dad. And my brother picked up the camera right after we came back, either right after his memorial service or when he came back from New York with the burial. My brother picked up my camera, and that same weekend he got his. And he likes to take pictures of birds, in South Florida. And for him, it really helps with his grieving process, because there's days where he goes, I just want to, shoot birds with the camera, not something else. Terminology. Let me clarify that for people. Take pictures, photos of birds, in South Florida. That's his toolbox, and that's what brings him peace too.
I notice on Facebook, every once in a while, you'll start getting a little snarky out there. And that's when I start to worry about you. And so I follow you even more closely, because I think that maybe something is, getting to you. And I think it's important as friends that we are aware of the changes in our personality, so that we can be there, whether it's to say the right thing or to, do something to make you, come back to the happy place.
And it might depend on the topic too, right? With stuff. But I also knew when I was going through the hard time, as Melinda said, back in 2018, where I wasn't writing any more jokes on Facebook. And once you lose your sense of humor, that identity, that sucks. And it does take a while to come back, for certain things. So the snarkiness may depend on the topic that I'm writing about for the day.
Me?
The sarcasm comes out a little bit more. But what's cool about that, Karen, is being friends where your friends could pick up on that.
Mhm.
I remember back in 2018 when we were doing the fundraiser for the nonprofit, and my friend Ray was taking new pictures for me. And same week I went to counseling, same week I had the plan to end it all. And Ray said, we can't use these pictures, you have sad eyes. And as much as we think we're hiding it from people, no, we're not. Our friends will know. And a year later, when we shot the book cover, which is this
Hold
one,
up the book.
the happy
I
eyes.
am mine.
The happy eyes, Ray was, God, I used the word happy. She goes, oh, the sad eyes aren't there. Yeah, because I put myself in grief counseling and the sad eyes went away. And I've done a couple of presentations for students at Kent State, and where I have both pictures side by side. And I ask which one's depressed Michael, which one's happy Michael. And
do they know?
yeah, they can see it too. And the eyes don't lie. I mean, what's the expression? The eyes are the windows to our soul. And people will know, the fake smile. I mean, we may think, hey, we're doing our best. And people go, you're not right. And yeah, so I think about that a lot. When I feel a little bit down, or I feel my serotonin levels drop, I think about sad eyes, happy eyes, and what I could do to get bounced back. May not be happy, I'm not going to be happy 24/7.
Nobody is.
Right? Exactly. And but it may take me a week to get back to it, wherever it is, but we go back to the tool, the toolkit and what I do for it.
Do you feel that you have people who say, oh, I get it, and they sit down and they tell you their story? And
Yes.
do you internalize that story because it's going to bring things back up for you while you're listening to them tell their story?
Yeah, and I have two I wouldn't say reactions to that. One, I'm very happy that they're reaching out to me. The other side of it is, I go, man, I'm not a counselor. What am I supposed to say to this person? What if you comment and it's the wrong thing? So I'm cautious with that. And then it gets overwhelming. It's like, oh my God, they just unloaded so much on me. They should really be talking to a counselor, but I think I'm more I want to say humbled and honored that they could share that with me. And, whether they read the book or hear my story, they feel they have that connection. And that's another reason why I love sharing my story, because if it helps that one person, even if they're just talking to me about it, that's awesome.
It's a start. You may be the person they start with because they feel safe in talking to you about it.
Yeah. So there's two sides of that coin, where you're blessed and you're humbled that they come to you, but at the same time, it's like, that's a lot of stuff they just unloaded on me. And then what do you go do? Well, go work out, whatever, but you try to help that person maybe get help or whatever it is. And yeah, I mean, I think, if you lose a parent, right, we may have that shared experience, but our grief is different.
It's different.
Absolutely.
Right? The processing, because the relationship you may have had with your parent different with mine. So that experience is different. So we may understand that the loss going, I know what it's like to lose a parent, but still it's different than everyone else. Just like, you losing your mom is more different than mine. Mine is, I never had the chance to know from my mom. So didn't have the denial, went right into acceptance, and then anger came, and then all the other, the bargaining and acceptance. Well, I already said acceptance. What are the other ones? I don't even know anymore. But I think there's 7. Purpose or meaning is another one that I read about. And, finding the meaning and purpose, of my mom's death has hopefully prevented other families from going through it.
And sometimes there is no reason, that you will never find that reason, that answer. And you have to find a way to be comfortable with not having the answer.
Correct. Because I spent many times thinking of all the what ifs. What if we didn't leave New York and go to South Florida? Would I be a Jets fan? That's horrible. Much rather be a Dolphins fan than a New York Jets fans. No offense, Jets fans. I actually take offense, Jets fans. But yeah, you think about those things. Would have been a doctor, a lawyer, whatever it is. Our lives would have been so much different before that. but also I feel blessed because I had Dolly in there. And when people go, would you do it all over again? That's a hard answer. That's a hard question to answer, because if I didn't have Dolly in my life, I think would have been a little bit easier. But her impact on me, my brother, my dad, people in our family, my friends that met her, and all this other stuff, man, it's been incredible to see the impact that she's made. And you take that one situation of losing her mom, and then you see the butterfly effect, right? And how, I know that's maybe the wrong expression, but I'm going to use it like I know what the hell I'm talking about. And but yeah, just how her life changed so many people's, and it goes back to how one person can impact so many.
Make a difference.
Dolly, yeah. So it's been, you take a horrible situation, and then we were blessed to have this woman in our life.
Just the pictures that you've shown of Dolly on Facebook, and the one interaction that we were able to have with her on one of your podcasts, even though she didn't want to talk, that was okay. That was fine, but she's left an impression on me. I mean, I can feel that, you could feel that love, that she really, really cares. And, some of us didn't have all that love in our life.
Right.
And so the what if, we have to throw that away and go with what we have.
Yeah.
Oh,
And go ahead.
The path that you're on has made a difference in a lot of people's lives for the better. And Dolly too.
I would hope so. Right. And Karen, to what you said, you can have your own biological parents not feel that love, right? We all know that, right?
Exactly.
And everything else. So the fact that it wasn't there, and during that interview with my grandmother, she put her fingers inside my crib, and supposedly I latched onto them and I smiled. And she said, this is where I need to be. This family needs me more than going back to Jamaica to be a nurse. So for her to put our needs ahead of hers.
Yep.
I mean, what do you say to that, right?
Mm.
And the people that read the book go, we want to meet Dolly. They don't care about me. They just want to meet her. And I went, I don't know how I feel about that. I'm right here in front of you. But it was interesting because I was writing of it. She goes, don't use my name. And she doesn't think she deserves any recognition for what she did. And that's why her part of the story needs to be told, because it does. Don't take that, to be so humble and thinking what I did was no big deal. Yeah, it was a big deal. I mean, we're talking 53 years later. I'll see her in a couple of weeks. When I called her, I have bad news about your Christmas gift. She goes, what? I go, I'm it. And but yeah, you take some of that to stick around for 53 years, even though my dad passed away. And someone asked me not too long ago, do you still have a relationship with her? I go, because your dad passed. I'm like, yeah, family's still family. Just because my dad passed doesn't mean we ended that relationship. Oh gosh, I wouldn't know what to do without her.
You posted a video, I think, on Facebook where you surprised her. Was it her birthday or something? And
No, that was when the book came out.
Oh, that's right. And
I couldn't put hers in the mail.
She was
Yeah,
so excited to see you.
Yeah, I couldn't put hers in the mail, and not knowing I was bringing her a copy, not knowing that she took someone else's book to read. So, but yeah, it's one of my, I don't surprise her anymore because now she's 92, so I'm not doing that. So I warn her before I come home, but I use that video in the program I do, the Stowe Court, and because it's heartwarming and
It is.
allows for ebb and flow of my story and just something nice and how this woman changed my life, because it goes back to purpose and in the human spirit, and I wouldn't be the person I am today if it wasn't for her. So I have to share that part. But the video is fun, and but she got me back the next year in New York when we were doing the unveiling for my dad and my aunt's headstones. My brother told me she couldn't come, and I was sitting in the backyard of my cousin waiting for him to come home, come from the airport. And who comes strolling on in? Dolly.
Of course.
So she got me back.
Turnabout's fair play.
Yeah, and then she
You're
was telling
wearing,
stories.
you're wearing a KISS t-shirt.
Yeah.
What does KISS have to do with your happiness? Because when you share pictures and talk about them, you are up here.
Yeah, I'm doing my countdown because the last touring show is Saturday. So I've been doing I think I started it on 11 more days to, the countdown. So we don't have that type of time, Karen. It's been my escapism. It's been their music is about celebrating life for most of the songs. Not the song Love Gun. I mean, that's a whole other issue, but just the concert and the people I've met being KISS fans and that sense of belonging. And when they weren't at their height of their success, you get picked on because you're a KISS fan, but they taught you how to stand up for yourself. Gene and Paul never did drugs or alcohol, so they were positive role models in my life. And they taught me, you can pursue your dreams, especially in rock and roll, and not engage in the drugs and be okay. Whereas two of the members were doing drugs and they kicked them out of their band. And they taught me that valuable lesson that my dreams and goals are too important that other people drag me down. Like I love doing stand-up, hated the lifestyle because you drive 3 or 4 hours. This was early on in my career, and you make $100 and you're giving it 70 of it back to the bar because you're hanging out with the other comics, the audience members. Love it, love performing, just not the lifestyle. And I remember meeting Gene a couple of times and telling him, thank you for being a role model. And he asked what happened to the man that killed my mother. And, to have that engagement with your role model was awesome. But I think it's the theatrics, the concert. It is that escapism from life. And just like a comedian, you want people who coming in the show, forget about their problems for the time you're on stage. And KISS is for 2 hours. You forget about everything and you leave and you're sweaty, you're happy, you're smiling. But I've been a KISS fan since 77. I was in second grade. So, it started with the makeup and stuff, and it gets about the celebration of life and going after your dreams and those type of things. So it's
what's interesting
cool.
to me with KISS and the different groups that there might be a few other ones that wear makeup and stuff is they could be KISS, do everything they do, take it off and walk away. Because people didn't know what they look like.
Correct. Not till 83 when they unmasked. Right. Yeah. It was a little bit different, but
it's a protection mechanism too. I think if you put yourself into the music, you enjoy the music, and when you're done, you can walk away and no one knows. So there might have been some of that, even if it maybe wasn't conscious. I think that's an unconscious piece.
Right. Yeah. And like I think I wrote today, you may hate KISS, you may love KISS, but there's no other band like them. And again, makes sense for me. It's my happy thing that, you don't have to like it, and that's fine. But it makes me happy, and it makes, they haven't been around, if they weren't good at what they did, they wouldn't have been around for 50 years.
Right.
Even they probably should have stopped touring like 20 years ago, to be honest with you. But still, it's like going to a nature hike or the park. It's that escapism. And it's awesome. And when I could celebrate that with my friends who also like the band and the purpose and stuff, that's awesome. Because then you're having that shared experience with 20,000 friends, or whatever it is. So, and that's pretty awesome.
And what about when it's the last show?
Saturday
there will be.
Comes, man, it's gonna be bittersweet. I'll be seeing with one of my best friends, so that's gonna be kind of special. And knowing that it's been a good ride since 77. The first time I saw him was 87, 88, something like that. It's sort of like a thank you for giving me so much in terms of my life. And it's gonna be awesome. It's gonna be sad in a way, but it's gonna be fantastic.
I think you could write a whole nother book just about KISS and your feelings over the years and how it's helped you.
I probably could, but the question is, would anyone want to buy it and read
Absolutely, we would. We would.
All right. I'm going to switch outlines for my next book. I have an outline for the next one, but now I'm going to have to switch it.
Okay.
I just feel there's a story there put out to everyone.
Okay.
Like you need a photography book, your pictures and.
Yeah, with that one, you have to sort of print it out first, and then people have to, put orders in, because those aren't easy to put together. And then the right printer and the paper, it's a little bit
You
different.
just put a story with the picture.
Yeah, it's a little bit different than self-publishing this on Amazon, with the picture book. And then it's just,
So-
then it's like, what pictures do I use? That's the hard part too.
Yeah.
Just like I was asked to do another exhibit for Western Reserve in January, and I started looking through pictures yesterday, and I narrowed it down to 40, and I have to cut that down to 35 more.
So you're
So-
fine.
Yeah, because I want to do like 5 this time, and it's like they're
Yeah.
all my little children, right? They're all so good, but which ones are going to make the cut? So we'll see. But it's an honor. And again, I think about my father and how
Mhm.
love knowing that my pictures were asked to be, in a hospital for people to look at, and then
Did your dad continue his photography, or did he stop doing that?
he did stop. I don't know when he stopped taking photos. I know we had lots of cameras and stuff. I remember we did more around junior high time. We turned our bathroom into a dark room a couple of times. So my brother and him were bigger into photography than I was as a kid. My brother had the dark room stuff underneath his bed. I had magic tricks underneath my bed and Star Wars toys.
Star Wars.
Yeah, lots of Star Wars toys underneath my bed, and the magic stuff, until we built a magic case. So, but I don't remember him taking photos, later on.
I just wondered if that was a piece that was associated with your mother, so that it was harder for him.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Because he would take pictures. I mean, I remember when I got ready for my bar mitzvah and stuff, he would take photos of me for certain things. And then after that too. I mean, but I don't remember when he might have stopped, and it might have, because he was good in playing the organ and piano, and even when he had Parkinson's, he still played the piano because he could do that in the assisted living facility. The
Mhm.
photography, I think, stopped years before that, even though he was still interested. And I remember when I went to go visit him, I was showing him pictures that I took up here, and even when they had the BiPAP machine on, he could still see and liked them. And then he asked for some of his photos and contact sheets. So my brother found them from storage, and one of the pictures I took of him in the hospital room is him with the pictures, and he's showing them to me. So even to then, he was still into it, but he just wasn't taking pictures like he used to, later in life.
Maybe that was his toolbox for him.
Yeah. Music,
Feeling.
the organ was probably his toolbox. He loved that. And you think about him for 40, he had Parkinson's for 8. So here was a man that had the mental anguish of losing his wife, his soulmate, for all those years, and then he got Parkinson's. But my dad was probably the strongest man that I ever knew, not weightlifting strong, but that mental component, because he didn't let Parkinson's stop him from enjoying the things that he liked doing, like
Wanted to
playing
do.
the piano. He knew when he could take his meds. He was a spokesperson for Parkinson's on the website. There's another video that I showed during my program about him playing the piano with Parkinson's. And I tell the DUI offenders, you have that power to change. And when I show the video of my dad going, he had Parkinson's, he didn't let that stop him. I mean, he could have, but he didn't let that get to him, and it made him happy, and he enjoyed it. And that was the message. And even when I get down myself, I watch, I go, hey, my dad's still teaching me lessons, for things in terms of life. So you take both those things, because he never gave up. Talk about suicide and men's grief, when he lost his mom, because obviously he had me and Jeff, to take care of and watch over too, which you always know that isn't always the case, right? So he was strong in that regard. And then he had, the Parkinson's, and, you take both those things, it was like a perfect storm for, someone, right? But he didn't give up. And that to me was, it's role model behavior for myself.
Absolutely.
That was his personality.
Yeah.
I mean, there are many people who would get shot down and go, oh, why me? This happened, this happened, this happened. My life sucks. But
Yeah.
I don't think that he did that. You certainly haven't done that. You've used the tools available to you to meet that challenge, right? And move forward.
I would guess he probably, internally said life sucks, for having it. And how can you not, right? Because you get this disease and you can't do things you want. So in a way, that part sucks. And there's times where I go, yeah, life sucks, and then I pick myself off the floor. And I think that's normal. You could do that as long as you don't stay in that world and
Right.
that feeling. Then it's okay. I think it's when you're always in that negativity where people always have dark clouds over their heads. Well, they could change that. That's just a circumstance.
Choice.
Right. It's a choice. And you could, for every choices, we either have good consequences or bad consequences. And you make the right choices, as hard as they are. Yeah, my dad chose, with Parkinson's, to still play the piano. He could have said it woe is me. I could have said woe is me my entire life. I could have crawled into a bottle and play the victim card my entire life, but I don't think my mom would want that for me. That's not how I was raised, either. Going back to what Karen asked about KISS, same thing. That power, to stand up for yourself and believe in yourself is so valuable. And even when my dad, with the music, he would always say turn it on. He never said turn it off. So we were always battling, him with Pavarotti and me with KISS in the house. It was very fun. But he was always very supportive, for the band, and he would send me articles about Gene Simmons when he would find it, and those type of things. So it was very cool. And he drove me to my first KISS concert. I thought that was pretty neat, and always very supportive, whether it's comedy. After grad school, go, hey, Dad, I'm going into comedy. He didn't kill me like a lot of parents would. He would be very supportive, and maybe our lives were a little bit different than other kids, right? Because he just lost me and lost my mom. And so I think supporting us for our dreams might have been a little bit different in our situation than other people.
Oh, probably. Well, before we go, because the time has zipped by.
Oh, wow.
I know. And you would think, we talk, Karen and you have talked bunches of times about things, but I always find something new in a conversation that we may be having, whether it's at the comedy club or here on the podcast. Talk about your book for a minute and what you do with that. So if people want to support your foundation, you can get that. Oh, there
Magical. It took me 20 years to write it. My good friend Greg Morton is another comedian. You may have seen him on America's Got Talent. Actually, he'll be the Funny Stop this Friday, Saturday.
This Friday. Yep, gonna be there.
I'll be singing KISS instead. But excuse me. But one of my best friends, when he heard my story back in late, probably 97, 98, he made me promise to write a book. And it took me 20 years to write it. It's called The Magical Life, which is based off my program, which is called The Magical Life, a son's story of hope after tragedy, grief, and a Speedo. Because I was a swimmer, not wearing one now. That would be weird. And, but it's my story. It's Dolly's story. It's anyone who's gone through trauma and grief. And there's, you have the trials and tribulations and a happy ending at the end of it. And it's, I think it's, again, humbling when people I don't even know contact me and say, hey, your book changed my life. And it goes back to our stories. You can find it on Amazon, and the proceeds.
Or if they see you,
it's what?
If they come see you, you sell the books at
sell the books at the comedy show, which I don't know when I'll be back. But even if you want an autographed copy, they can always contact me. The website is themagicoflife.org, and there's a link on there to Amazon. But the proceeds will go to the Magical Life Foundation, which is our organization that helps us prevent impaired driving. And one of the goals is to help kids impacted by drunk driving. So we've donated some money. If we could find GoFundMe pages of kids who've been impacted by drunk driving, whether it's help pay for hospital costs, because I had Dolly, not every kid has that. So, so we try to do that as well with the foundation.
I have one quick question for you because I saw this posted on Facebook and I wish I had known about it before the last election. But the last election, marijuana got approved for the state of Ohio.
Recreational.
But I saw a conversation you had with somebody, the concern you have over it, which
Mhm.
so many of us probably didn't even think of. So can you sort of in a nutshell tell us what that concern is?
Yeah, and I was torn because I understand the medical purposes of it, but I'm torn because I don't want more impaired drivers on the roads. And the states that had it, Colorado before us, and some other states, they've seen an increase in car crashes due to people being high behind the wheel of the car. And that's a major concern because the numbers have gone up in the state of Ohio for drunk driving, or really impaired driving, whether it's prescription drugs, alcohol, whatever it is. There's been more deaths, even in Summit County. More than half the fatalities on the road in Summit County in Ohio have been caused by an impaired driver. That's ridiculous. And my fear is we're going to see more people behind the wheel of the car impaired. And, people always snicker and go, oh, I'm high, you drive slower and stuff. No, you're still a danger, to everyone.
You don't react as quickly.
Correct. And that's what I don't like about it. So that's why I voted no, because of that reason, even though I understand the purpose of it. If you have cancer, whatever it is. So
Well, that medically was already approved. This became
that's
a
true too.
recreational
It's
issue.
recreational, yeah. And so I voted no only because of road safety and wanting to protect more lives on our streets.
Mhm.
Like I said, I wish that more of us had thought about it in that manner before the vote. But I appreciate your comments because now I guess it means all of us need to be just a little bit more observant and careful.
Mhm.
Yeah, human behavior is stupid because, if people wouldn't drive drunk, we wouldn't have laws against drunk driving. Phones, people are still on their phones in Ohio, even though it's outlawed. And now we have of this too. So we have to have laws because unfortunately as humans, we're dumb in some regards. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being on again. We
Thank you
won't
for
wait
having me.
4 more years before we
I
have you
appreciate
back, 3-4 years.
Thank you.
But thank you so much for being on, and hopefully one person heard your message today. Will read your book and it'll make a difference. I'm sure it will.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
A great time at the KISS concert.
Yeah, have a
Thank
good
you.
time.
Say hi to Greg for me. I'll miss him.
I will. Take care.
Thank you. Take care,
Bye.
everybody. Bye-bye now.